I paid for my friend's wife. It was a surprise for me to answer the knock on the door, open it, and find a gun pointed at me. A man in that position feels very vulnerable. After all, he is only wearing boxer shorts. Charles stood still, and I could see that his eyes were red, and he was upset. More than upset, it was like rage. I even knew what kind of gun it was. I'd sold it to Charles about 2 years ago. It was a Smith & Wesson .38 caliber, one of those designed for concealed carry in a holster. It had a very short barrel, and I wasn't very fond of the gun. Charles passed all the tests and got the permit. He carried the same himself, but his gun was blue, and the one I sold him was stainless. That's the gun Charles was holding in his hand. His wife, Alice, also went with him to get the permit. The gun was meant for her. It fit in her purse, which had a small compartment to hold it. Charles was a buddy of mine. We did a lot of things together, so I saw them often. He was short, about 150 pounds, but not a large man by any means. I'm a large man, 6 feet tall and about 220, a little belly but not much, mostly just big. Alice? A soft and sweet, slender woman, mostly shy, at least in public. Charles obviously ran their house. The few times we went outside, he gave Alice orders that sounded more like orders than requests. There were quite a few of these moments. Charles was often harsh with Alice, but she always seemed to obey instantly. It wasn't a big deal, but it was noticeable. When Alice wasn't in public, she behaved quite differently, which I now understood perfectly well, since the moment I opened the door, Alice was in my bedroom. So of course I knew exactly why Charles was here, and looking back, I really couldn't blame him. "Charles? What?" I managed to blurt out, but he didn't answer. He just pulled the trigger. Someone who has never heard a .38 caliber pistol being fired inside a building might not understand. It's loud, very loud. Charles was only about 3 feet away from me. He stood there looking at me, perhaps surprised that he had actually pulled the trigger, or perhaps even more surprised that for about 2 seconds I just stood there in shock. Then I started to move. The right thing to do would have been to head straight for him, but instinct makes one pull away, hands coming into motion on their own for defense. Load the gun. Run from the knife is standard advice when threatened. Of course, when that happens, everything is immediately canceled. I headed for something to grab onto and get away from him when a second shot filled the room with sound. It missed me too, as did the third, as I was now moving sideways, trying to get behind the couch. Thinking about it later, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to get behind the couch. Just as I turned to look at him, I saw his left arm come up to help level the gun, and this time, he wasn't going to miss. "What? Oh my God, Charles, no!" I heard Alice yell. She was standing in the hallway, having just come out of the bedroom. She was wearing only a thong. That probably saved my life. Charles turned and shot her a look. She stood, eyes wide open, paralyzed with fear. At 110 pounds, Alice was not a very attractive target. The painting I had hung on the wall next to the hallway collapsed to the floor. Alice's hand was already coming up to her mouth when I felt the 5th shot burn through my side. That was 5. I could count. The gun was empty. I turned and went for it. Charles was already reaching into his pocket when I toppled him over onto his back. Fresh shell casings scattered through the air, and he fell. I hit him twice. Neither blow was soft, and he stopped resisting. I walked over and picked up the small gun and went back into the house. "Are you okay?" I asked Alice. She was still standing there in shock. I looked around her. Not a mark. One round had hit the picture frame, and Charles had missed her by a good foot. I hugged her for a moment. She was trembling. Then I heard Charles moaning outside, so I went to get some twine and tied his hands behind his back. Then I tied his legs together and tied his hands to his feet. Alice went back into the bedroom and pulled on slacks and a blouse. "What are we going to do?" she asked, still shivering. "We have to call 911, I told her. I headed for the phone, but then I heard a siren wail in the distance. It sounded like one of the neighbors had beat me to it. I called anyway. saying that we had an armed intruder and I had disarmed him. "The gun was empty and I had him tied up," I told the dispatcher, hoping the cops wouldn't come through the door shooting. "We received that call, sir, and the police are on their way. Please stay on the line." I hung up, went and sat down to wait. I placed both hands palms down on the armrest of my chair. For several hours, it seemed like police officers were everywhere. After we explained everything, and they looked around and found the bullet holes, Charles was handcuffed and taken away. When one of them looked at me, then at Alice, recognizing that Alice was Charles's wife, I could see the disgust in his face. They knew, of course. They'd probably experienced this kind of situation more than once. They didn't look at me very friendly either. Alice sat quietly with her hands folded in her lap. One of them asked where I'd been hit, and I showed him the red streak on my side that was still bleeding furiously. "Better get that looked at. Looks like you two just got lucky," he told me. "We usually pick up dead men when someone fiddles with someone else's wife," he added contemptuously. I'm sure I felt a little ashamed at those words. "I don't blame the guy for shooting that asshole," I heard one of them say to the other as they walked away. I felt myself blush even more at that remark. It looked like they were right. What had been an amusing illegal interlude had turned into a complete mess, very close to tragedy, and now nothing would ever be the same again. Over the next few days, one detective and another, they kept asking questions, and Alice. Charles was brought in for a bail hearing, and he told the judge that as soon as he got out, he would find another gun and finish the case. Of course, this forced him back to his jail cell. Alice had no trouble getting a restraining order. She moved into a motel just in case. She told me where, but I didn't dare go there. The cops didn't give her the gun back, it was evidence. And so ended this wild and crazy affair. I knew better, of course, but Alice, as it turned out, was very hard to resist. Charles and I had known each other for about 5 or 6 years. His wife, Alice, was a delightful little thing to look at. She probably weighed 110 pounds if she was wet. She always had a smile on her face. We all dated a lot. In my case, it was someone I was dating at the time. I think it all started at a beach party. We had a few tents, and it was an enjoyable time. The weather was hot. Even at night, it was about 65 degrees. My traveling companion was a tall, well-built girl named Shelley. The first thing she did was take off her top, which quickly caught Charles's attention. It was obvious that he enjoyed looking at Shelley's breasts. He then leaned over and whispered something to Alice, her face turning bright red. Alice soon hesitantly followed suit, and it was a shock because I had known them for a long time, but had never seen her breasts before. At first she blushed and tried to hide them, but Shelley was so relaxed and frank that soon Alice relaxed too. Charles looked flustered. Shelley was lying on her back, her large breasts exposed to the sun and anyone who wanted to look, and his wife Alice was doing the same. It was obvious that Shelley was used to it, but Alice was not. Her small breasts were white as snow. Later, Shelley got up and saw that Alice was blushing, so she took the lotion and rubbed it on her. It was fun to watch. Shelley seemed to enjoy it. Charles leaned forward as if what she was doing gave him pleasure. Then, as Charles and I sat there, both of us quite aroused, Shelley stood up and pulled off the bottom of her costume. "I don't want to wet them, I want to put them on later." She didn't say anything to anyone. Nothing was hidden, and Charles nearly fainted at the sight. Then he leaned over and whispered something to Alice again, and she looked at me and shook her head. He said something else, and seemingly more firmly, and her face turned bright red. Finally, after another encouragement, Alice stood up and, without looking at me, pulled off the bottom of her costume. That's when I realized she was a natural blonde. There was no doubt about it. She jogged off to join Shelley in the water. When they returned, they were holding hands. Shelley lowered herself onto her back and turned to face Sunshine. "Hey guys, put your tongues away. I just need to sunbathe out there." She smiled at us and then lay down, closing her eyes. The way she was lying made her body flush slightly. Shelley was, of course, aware of this. Alice lay down next to her on the blanket. Charles watched her, furtively casting glances back and forth at me. I tried my best to act like this was the most normal thing in the world. I saw Alice furtively look at me through squinted eyes, and finally she opened her body just as Shelley did. Later, Shelley and I were secluded in our tent, and we had sex. One thing about Shelley is that she is noisy. I assumed Charles and Alice were doing the same thing, but I didn't hear anything. At one point, I felt the need to pee, so I got up and walked away to the nearest bushes. I didn't bother pulling on my swimming trunks. The full moon was already out, but it was still a bit dark. As I walked to the tent, I noticed that the flap on their tent was moving, so I figured Alice was peeking. That turned me on, too, and Shelley and I got back into the act quite vigorously. The next morning, I woke up early as usual, pulled on my swim trunks and t-shirt. Alice was already outside. She was drinking coffee and sipping a cup. I could see that she was only wearing a white t-shirt. She was sitting on the big log we had rolled out, so there was somewhere to sit. She tucked the hem of her t-shirt between her legs when she saw me coming out. "I hope we didn't embarrass you yesterday," she smiled, pouring me a cup. "What? Oh no, of course not. We're all friends, and besides, you're beautiful," I told her. "Oh, do you really think so?" she asked, tucking her hair back with one hand. "Yeah, I think so. I like the way you look, so cute and slim and not concerned about your body. It's great when you can be relaxed about sexuality." I didn't try to placate her with compliments, I just spoke. "I've just never done it out in the open in front of another guy," she said. "Really? Well, what did you think? It didn't embarrass you?" I asked. "Number it made me kind of turned on." Then she giggled. "I could see that you liked looking at me." She smiled. "Yes, I did." I smiled back. "I saw you last night when you were leaving." "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "That's okay. I liked it too." She grinned. I didn't know what to say back, so I just took a sip of coffee. Alice stared at me. Her mouth opened, her breathing replaced by short sighs. Finally, I pulled away, and now she was looking down. "I never—" Then she jumped up and went into the tent. For a brief moment, I worried that she might say something to Charles, but when he came out, everything was fine. By mid-afternoon, we broke camp and headed home. I think that was the day all the trouble started. A few months before, I had sold Charles my small pistol. I had bought myself an automatic with a larger grip, and it fit my hand much better. He paid me almost the full price of a new one for it, and I figured it was a good deal. I even took them out to a familiar place, set up a paper plate as a target. From 15 yards, Alice never hit it, and neither did Charles. I hit the paper plate 2 times out of 5, but the little gun was a little small for my big hands, so it was hard for me to be accurate. I pulled out my machine gun and put 5 of the 6 rounds into the 3-inch dark circle I'd drawn with a magic marker pen. "I hope you never have to use it, and if you do, you'll be so close you can't miss," I told them. After that, I forgot all about it. A few weeks later, I had just gotten out of the shower. It was about 8 in the morning, and I was working a shift change at my job. Someone knocked on my door. I wrapped a towel around my waist and answered it. Alice was standing there. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Yeah, not dressed." "That's okay, I've seen you before." She smiled. Alice looked different, maybe more stubborn or determined. I don't know for sure. I opened the door further and she walked in. She turned and looked at me, and all I could think about was my towel, and my wet hair was a mess. I want to ask you if you'll make love to me." The words came out quickly. "What? I can't. Charles." "Charles will never know. But he's the only man I've ever made love to. I have to know." I just stared at her. "I don't understand," I said after a few long seconds. "Charles, he goes away too fast, so I never felt much of anything." Her face took on a stubborn expression again. "Please?" she asked. Why me? You're so beautiful any man would love. I know you and I trust you. Besides, I've heard you and Shelley. Please? She asked again. Lord, help me. I reached for her. As my hands slid under the simple blouse she was wearing and touched her braless breasts, I felt the towel come undone and fall to the floor. Two tiny arms reached down and wrapped around me, and Alice let out a sigh. Just this once, and then you'll know, I told her. Okay, she said. That turned out not to be true. Depending on her shift, Alice ended up in my bed almost every day. It was almost 20 minutes before we made love. That first time was incredible. I had been with many women, but she was madly in love with sex. The first few times I wanted it to end. Charles was a friend, and I was doing him wrong, and I knew it. I had periods where I planned to end the relationship. But then she ended up being there for me, and all was forgotten. Then I fell in love with her and wanted her for myself. I'm not sure when that happened. I just started liking the whole thing. It was even more crazy, but I confessed my love to her. I had already forgotten about other women. They didn't interest me. That last time, the day of all the trouble, she told me she loved me too. She hadn't planned it. It just happened. Alice was just telling me that she wanted to get away from Charles, to give him time to calm down, because Charles was often angry and sometimes scared her. I saw that in him, but never really thought about it. Just as I was making plans, there was a knock on the door. How it missed me from 3 feet away? I don't know. But I found a bullet hole in the pant leg of my boxers, so I know who he was aiming at. It was quite a scandal. The whole thing even made the papers. Both Alice and I suffered from the comments and the fact that people looked down on us. A few months passed, and Charles was finally released with a warning to stay away from both me and his wife. I stopped seeing Alice myself, although we did talk on the phone. I applied to move to a plant that was being built in Arkansas and got it, so I left Washington and moved there. I called Alice and told her about it. She cried into the phone when I finally hung up. I guess the only thing I can say is that I felt really bad about myself. I was losing weight and not going on dates at all. Everything I owned fit into one truck that I drove to my new job. The house I rented was cozy and secluded. I didn't learn of the outcome of the trial until much later. Without my testimony, Charles may have gotten off easier. Although I know I could be found, I left no address, and I doubt they would look. 6 long months passed, 6 long and terribly lonely months. I was in the yard working a small lawn with an old mower I bought at the store when a cab pulled up. A short, dark-haired woman got out, paid the driver, and took a suitcase out of the car. She set it on the curb and looked at me. Long dark hair, sunglasses, something familiar, and then it hit me. Alice! We threw ourselves at each other, eventually falling to the lawn, kissing frantically. Now, 3 years later, Alice and I are married. We have 1 daughter and another baby on the way. There are alarms on the doors and windows, and we watch for movement. There are firearms leaning against the wall behind each door, and my assault rifle rests on the headboard of our bed. Alice told me that the last thing her ex-husband told her was that one day he would come and finish the job. She also told me that Charles got 3 years, and the charge was reduced from attempted murder to assault. He will most likely be out long before that. She also told me that she was sure that's what he meant. I'm inclined to agree. She really didn't ask him for anything, and that's exactly what she got. In her purse was $8, and in her suitcase were her clothes from the day she got out of the cab. She tracked me down through my work, which wasn't hard at all. Of course, if she could do it, so could Charles. But so far, there's no sign. Will Charles really go so far as to come after us again? Yes, I think he might. Otherwise, Alice and I are happy. We go to a nearby shooting range on weekends, and Alice now hits the 6-inch circle about 90% of the time. Some things have consequences. Taking a man's wife away from him can be a dangerous thing to do. I did it, so I guess I'm guilty. Alice and I love each other and are mostly happy. But we look closely at every unfamiliar car, sometimes lying awake at night listening. We both know why, but we don't talk about it. Maybe it will always hang over our heads. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.